Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So we finally got information on the Spiritborn class. This is actually footage of the Spiritborn class, thanks to one of the many streamers that was invited to the Blizzard headquarters. This is Woodijo, or Woodijo, right there. And he's playing the Spiritborn class as we're talking. Now, I got a lot of information, all the skills. I've got some of the unique items. I've got some aspects. I've got some various things that we can go over and we can look at and talk about today. Basically, though, let's get right into it. All right, so basically, the Spiritborn class is a glaive wielding or staff wielding, and staves apparently have a blocking ability. They're actually able to block as well, which is kind of interesting. And there are four guardian spirits to the class. There is the jaguar, the uh, I can't remember what it was. I just the bird spirit. I can't remember the name. It was like Quetz or something like that. There's also the gorilla, and then there is the centipede. Each one of them embodying a specific style or element type. The jaguar is fire. The bird is lightning. The gorilla is physical, and the centipede is like poison. They also tend to embody like other things as well. Like the jaguar is attacking fast. The bird is like, kind of has like big AOE, like tactical kind of attacks. They'd go out and then come back. You'll see some of them on the footage here. The gorilla is really all about tankiness and thorns. There's a lot of thorns abilities that will reflect thorns or dish thorns back to the enemy. So, like, if you guys are interested in a really interested, like a really powerful thorns build, it looks like the gorilla is going to be your choice for thorns damage. And we'll be going over all the skills here in a little bit and talking about them. Then we have the centipede. The centipede is kind of focused on poison damage, but also decay and basically death and healing. Because, like, from decay comes food, and food is life, and that basically the centipede eats the decay and the death of life and heals you. So it's a poison slash healing sort of a build. Um, Now, when you level up the Spiritborn, you basically get access to the abilities, and there are a lot of different abilities that you can choose from. Basically, there's four different choices between the guardian spirits, of course, and then you can also choose a secondary guardian spirit as well. And the secondary guardian spirit gives you another benefit. Now, when you choose your first guardian spirit, all other abilities in your tree are going to be marked as that guardian spirit's ability. So, for instance, like if I choose centipede, even the jaguar's attacks will now be centipede attacks, and so forth and so on, according to the way that everything is marked. Now, this also means that you can choose the same thing twice. So you could choose like Jaguar Jaguar, or you could choose any of the other combinations like Jaguar Bird, Jaguar Gorilla, Jaguar Centipede, etc., and get various benefits to choosing sub archetypes and things like that. Now I do have a little bit of information on those, and let's go ahead and pull some of this stuff up because I got the unique items. Let's go over the unique items first. This is the Scorn of the Earth. This is one that specifically seems to function kind of like the way that the teleport does on the sorceress, where you can turn the teleport into a evasion skill. So soar deals 50% times increased damage, and your evade is now soar. So every time you evade, you get a soar ability. So basically the same thing like when you do the teleport sorceress and you change your evade into teleport, so you can teleport every single time you evade. It's an interesting correlation. In fact, when I saw them use the soar ability, and you'll see it probably in some of the footage, is it looks like teleport. It kind of does look like teleport. So for those of you who are interested in like a teleporting character, well, this character does seem to have a pseudo teleport. There's also this one which is Sepa Zontek, which is your basic skills deal 200% increased damage. Always use their third attack, and every third cast unleashes triple strikes. Now, basically, when it comes to the basic abilities or a lot of the abilities, there seems to be like this theme along the idea of like a 3-hit combo of like the first hit being like a small hit, the second hit being like a kind of okay hit, and then like the third hit being like this massive chongus boy. And so what this does is it kind of like makes that third hit always activate, which is interesting. This is the board where you actually choose your guardian spirit. As you can see, the Jaguar is every fourth time you deal direct damage to an enemy with a Jaguar skill. Unleash an additional slashing, dealing 100% of the damage of the 4 hits. All skills are now Jaguar skills. Then we have the Eagle, which is casting an Eagle skill grants 2 Storm Feathers up to a maximum of 8. When you evade, all Storm Feathers are fired, dealing 100 to 123, 100% lightning damage, and making targets vulnerable for 3 seconds. All skills are now also Eagle skills. I also have the Gorillas and the Centipedes, but I don't have screenshots of them precisely. Let me pull up some information here. Of course, I've got the. Where? I don't know why my taskbar is over here. I was wondering where the hell my taskbar was. It was just missing. That was amazing. Which does not make things easy when you're trying to look for your taskbar. You're like, where's my taskbar? It's just gone. My taskbar's gone. So in the Diablo 4 blog post, there is some information as well, and that's where I pulled up the information for the Gorilla. The Centipede is all about poison damage and slowing targets. That one is actually not as complicated as it seems. It basically has extra poison damage, and it also slows all targets around you. So here is the Gorilla right here. Of course, it changed the position on the page when I moved it over. Casting a Gorilla skill deals 100% of thorns to enemies you hit and grants a barrier for 10% maximum life, up to 40% for 3 seconds, and all skills are now also Gorilla skills. So this is pretty cool for the Thorns builds. Like if you're trying to do a Thorns character, you can get some pretty nice damage output through your Thorns this way. I think pretty much all the Thorns, anybody who's really interested in building like a really powerful Thorns character, this is probably the way that you're going to want to go, is the Gorilla. And the Gorilla is really tanky too, so it kind of meets both categories. And as you can see, there's also a secondary effect. Now, I don't have all the secondary effects, but as you can see, like the maximum ferocity is increased by 1. Gain 1 stack of ferocity whenever you kill an enemy or damage a boss. And I do have some of that here, like for instance, these are the 3 right here. So Centipede, Spiritborn, Focus, or 4, focuses on poison damage and debuffs to drain life from their foes. Jaguar adopts a aggressive style that relies on flashy multi-hit attacks that utilize fire as their primary element. Gorilla Spiritborn is a defensive fighter focusing on resilience and mitigation. They are masters of physical damage and also thorns. Doesn't really say that here. Eagle Spiritborn, highly agile master of mobility. They're precise strikers who are evasive and control the element of lightning. I got a couple of the aspects here too. I've got the Quill's Volley. Feathers explode upon reaching their apex for 78% of its base damage, and then returned to the Spiritborn where they are cast. This is another option. So you can see here, this is the main focus spirit, and then this below is your like secondary spirit. So if you choose your primary spirit and then your secondary spirit, you get different buffs for each. We also have Vital Strikes. Let's see here. I do believe I have all of these skills, so we can go over these one by one and talk about them. So this is one of the first basic skills called Withering Fist. This is the Centipede. It's also marked as a mobility. It's dart at and jab at an enemy, dealing 5% poison damage and applying a 30% poison damage over time. Your third attack bursts on your target, damaging surrounding enemies and slowing them by 30% for 3 seconds. And then, of course, we also have the additional modifiers, which is the Withering Fist. Enhanced Withering Fist, you gain 1 vigor per second every nearby enemy poisoned by Withering Fist, up to 10. And then we got Sharp Withering Fist. Withering Fist third attack spreads to poison. It's poisoning to 3 nearby unaffected enemies. Hitting a vulnerable enemy will also spread that effect to all hit. And then we get Accelerated Withering Fist. Enemies poisoned by Withering Fist deal 20% less damage to you. So that's pretty nice. Then we have the Jaguar's basic ability, which is Thrash. Dive at an enemy and slash into it, dealing. It's basically a movement skill. It definitely is a movement skill. Like if you watch the footage of them doing it, it basically just sends you directly to the target. And then the third attack unleashes a rapid series of slashes around your target, dealing a total of 25% damage. The slashes are actually really cool. They basically just kind of like cat slashes in the air. It's pretty neat. Enhanced Thrash. After killing an enemy, your next Thrash generates 10 additional vigor, up to 10 casts of Thrash. Thrash's third attack grants a stack of Ferocity. So there's basically new categories of things. There is the Vigor stat, which is going to be crucial to the way that this character works, and there's also Ferocity, which increases your attack speed by 5% per stack. This effect stacks up to 4 times and lasts for 4 seconds. So this is a nice little attack speed bonus that you can get. And so every time you hit the third stack, you're going to grab 5% increased attack speed. Then we have Accelerated Thrash. Thrash continues to unleash its third attack if cast again within 1.5 seconds. So this allows you to build up to the third attack and then spam the third attack. As long as you are attacking quickly enough, you get multiple casts of the third attack, which is nice. Then we have the Eagles ability. Now you notice it also has the centipede on there. That's because they've chosen the centipede as their guardian spirit. So anytime you choose one of the guardian spirits, it adds that modifier onto all of the abilities. But this is the Eagle's basic attack, which is quickly jab forward with a piercing strike, dealing 18 to 22 damage, 15% damage. Your third attack pierces further, dealing 33% damage and reducing your evade cooldown by 5 seconds. Now it's important to note that all of these characters were level 30. So they were using some pretty pathetic gear, and obviously the damage numbers here aren't representative of what you would see when you have like a fully decked out character. Enhanced Thunderstrike. Thunderstrike generates 5 additional vigor if you have moved in the last 2 seconds. Accelerated Thunderspike. When you evade, you attack with Thunderspike along the way and make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. Sharp Thunderspike. Thunderspike's third attack strikes back again, pulling in and knocking down distant enemies for 4.5 seconds. And then we're on to the Gorilla ability. So this is the Gorilla. The Gorilla also is a mobility. It's crazy how like all of these are some sort of mobility attack. And when you see the footage of the character, like when you watch the way that the character's moving, they definitely have this like extreme mobility to them in the way that they move around all the time. That's the really freaking awesome eagle attack, which which is kind of insane, to be perfectly honest. I actually really like that one, the way that it just goes around and just starts. It's pretty cool. Let's see if I can get to some of the mobility attacks here. There you go. So you notice how like everything seems to move you across the board. So we've got like these attacks and they just kind of shing and you're just moving in the direction. All the mobility attacks have some sort of like a way that they're moving you around the battlefield, which is kind of interesting. Although it kind of reminds me of the way the rogue dash works, where you're constantly dashing back and forth. Although instead of dashing through the monster, you're dashing to the monster. Although some of them also dash to instead of through, which is interesting. The Rock Splitter, which is the Gorilla's ability, is rush at a target and clobber enemies in front of you, dealing 15% damage, and your third attack strikes enemies around you, dealing 28% damage in an AoE. Then we get Enhanced Rock Splitter, increases your block chance by 15% for 5 seconds. When you block, you gain 11 vigor. An Accelerated Rock Splitter increases your thorns by 13 for 5 seconds, and your third attack deals 100% of your thorns to enemies. Now, I'm assuming that thorns number probably scales with level, so when you hit level 100, it's probably going to be a hell of a lot more than that. And of course, this allows you to apply your third attack as 100% thorns to the enemy. So this is a way that you can, of course, apply your thorns damage to the actual enemy. Then we get Sharp Rock Splitter. Rock Splitter's third attack knocks enemies back and grants resolve per enemy hit. And then we get Crushing Hand. This is the first of the core skills. So this is the first. This is the Gorilla's core skill, which is smash down next to you with creating 2 shockwaves on either side that overlap and each deal 25% damage. It's very it's very much so an AoE ability. I mean, you just smash the ground basically, and then it creates some little shockwaves that come out. Enhanced Crushing Hand grants a barrier equal to 10% of the damage, and it deals for 2 seconds, up to 50% of your maximum life. Then we get Rampant Crushing Hand, which is Crushing Hand's radius is increased by 5% for every stack of Resolve you have, up to 40%. Resolve is kind of like the damage reduction stat that is inherent with the Gorilla. And you can see down at the bottom it says Resolve increases your damage reduction by 20% while active. Taking direct damage consumes a stack, and you can hold up to 8 stacks. So basically, as long as you have any stack, doesn't matter how many stacks you have, as long as you have at least one stack, you get 20% damage reduction. So having a stack or any stack at any time will give you a nice little DR boost, which is great for Thorns builds because you kind of want to get hit. And of course, if you want to get hit, well, then you're going to want to, mitigate that damage in some way. Advantageous Crushing Hand. Enemies hit by both strikes of Crushing Hand are knocked down for 2 seconds. Then we get Quill Volley, which is the core Eagle skill. Hurl 5 feathers that pierce through enemies, dealing 14% damage. We saw that a little bit in the footage earlier. It's actually pretty nice. It goes out in a big fan, and it's kind of nice. And it has some good little upgrades that you can do to it as well. Enhanced Quill Volley. Quill Volley makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds if they are hit with at least 3 feathers at once. Quill Volley's feathers fly 50% further and converge on your target with a 0.20% plus additional critical strike chance for each point of vigor you had on cast. Advantageous Quill Volley. Quill Volley hurls out 3 additional feathers and deals 30% increased damage to each enemy per hit. Then we have the core Jaguar skill. This one is Rake. Rake is Conjure Claws that rake through enemies in front of you, dealing 20% of damage before exploding for an additional 40% damage. Then we get Enhanced Rake. Casting Rake grants a stack of Ferocity. So Ferocity, we talked about earlier, was getting the 5% increased attack speed per stack, up to 4 stacks. So basically, you can get 20% increase there, and you can get it from multiple Jaguar skills. So if you kind of like stack the Jaguar skills, you can definitely get a lot of increased attack speed. And then on top of that, the Jaguar skill, or like the choosing the Jaguar as your guardian itself, also gives you a free 4th attack, which is kind of neat. Advantageous Rake. Hitting at least one enemy with Rake reduces your longest active cooldown by 0.5 seconds. Rampant Rake. Rake's vigor cost is reduced by 2 per stack of ferocity that you have. Stinger. So this is the core skill for the Centipede. Strike a small area, dealing damage to enemies within as well as surrounding poison enemies. So this one seems rather limited in scope. It only does a small circle basically around the player when they strike the target. However, it does have some interesting secondary connotations, which is it can dish out more damage to monsters nearby, depending on what's going on. So like when you stab the ground, if there are monsters nearby that are poisoned, they might also take the damage. And then on top of that, there's also chances to like chain the damage to additional targets. It's a little bit odd to see on camera because it looks rather unimpressive when it just hits the ground and does nothing. But then when there's a lot of monsters nearby that are also poisoned, it does have some interesting effects, and it seems rather fun. Stinger applies 50% of its base damage as poisoning over 6 seconds to all enemies hit for Enhanced Stinger. And then we also have Rampant Stinger. Stinger deals 5% times increased direct damage to elites for every nearby poisoned enemy. Advantageous Stinger. If Stinger strikes a vulnerable enemy, it heals you for 10% of your maximum life. If you are healthy, it makes the enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. This Centipede is all about poison and healing yourself, so keep that in mind as we go forward. Actually, this will work surprisingly well with the Starlight aspects. I imagine that you could probably get some really good use out of this with the Starlight aspect, which is something that's been fixed in Season 5. So the Starlight aspect was one that basically would, if you healed yourself for 20% of your maximum life, you would get back 50% or 50 of your maximum of your resource, whatever your resource was, right? So 2 of these abilities, and you will heal yourself for 20%, and then you will obviously get 50 resource back. Although it's unfortunate that if you are healthy, like if you actually have full health, you're not going to get your resource back, so it's a little bit awkward there. But there's definitely a lot of ways within this tree you can heal yourself, and since they fixed the Starlight aspect to work with overhealing, could be interesting to see how the Centipede works with the Starlight aspect coming up. We also have follow through. These are passive, so we do have passives as well. Your basic skills deal 10 times % increased damage and double this bonus for third attacks. Vigorous, casting a core skill increases all vigor generation by 15% for 3 seconds. Velocity, generate 1 vigor for each second while moving if you have dealt damage in the last 5 seconds. And then we have the Focus Eagle skill. By the way, if you're interested in any of these screenshots and you just want to harvest them from the stream, I do have them on the Discord. So if you want to like check out the Discord and pull them from there, if you're in the kinship, they are in the D2, D4 kinship ladder chat, and you can just copy them from there. Vortex is create a cyclone that pulls enemies inward, followed by a crushing downdraft that deals 35% damage to them. So this is a pull-in. It's on a 12-second cooldown. It actually, I've seen a couple examples of this being used, and it does seem to work pretty well. We also have Enhanced Vortex. Casting Vortex increases the damage of the next skill by 20% times. Measured Vortex. While you have an active barrier, your Vortex does 200% times additional damage and knocks enemies down for 3 seconds. This seems kind of potent, especially for the fact that you just need to have a barrier. There's lots of ways to generate barriers. Replenishing Vortex. Critical strikes with Vortex reduce its cooldown by 1 second. And then we have Soar. This is the mobility skill that I was talking about that's very similar to Lightning. You fly into the air, creating a cloud, which makes enemies vulnerable at your target location for 5 seconds before you crash down upon them. Basically, you just kind of disappear from where you are. You jump up in the air, almost like a dragoon jump from Final Fantasy, and then you land basically on top of them. And it's actually pretty potent. And I showed you earlier that there's that unique item that also turns the what are you doing, Dusty? There's the unique item that also turns basically your evade into your soar. So I think a lot of people are probably going to be using this one because it's a very effective mobility ability. People tend to like teleport, and they're probably going to like this one too. Then we also have the next hit against an enemy struck by Soar's guaranteed critical strike. If Soar hits no enemies, you instead gain a 50% increased movement speed for 3 seconds. Replenishing Soar. Soar's cloud remains around you for 7 seconds after landing and continues to make enemies vulnerable. Now, I've seen this one. It kind of looks like a evil lightning cloud that just surrounds you like a evil lightning donut, and it stays up for a little while as you're running around. It's kind of neat. Measured Soar. Soar makes you unstoppable for 3 seconds. So there you go. It's unstoppable within the build. Another passive, Unrestrained. You deal 3% times increased damage while unhindered or unstoppable. Unhindered is one of the new modifiers that they added into the game because basically unhindered characters can move through enemies and their movement speed cannot be reduced. So it's a new modifier that they're kind of like working in. It's different than the old modifier that apparently wasn't quite working properly, so they've kind of like did it, and it now has its own little thing. But unhindered is a new thing. So unhindered means that you can move through enemies, and you also cannot have your movement speed reduced while the effect is active. So that's pretty nice. Swift, your mobility skill cooldowns are reduced up to 6 seconds based on how far you travel with them. Mirage, gain 100% increased dodge chance during evade. Whenever you dodge, you gain 5% critical strike chance for 3 seconds. So this is like a straight up bonus for people that want to do dodge chance, which, by the way, I forgot to mention that this class is based off of dex. So when you're building your character, you're going to have a massive amount of dex, which means you're probably going to have a massive amount of dodge chance innately. And so setting up for like 100% dodge certainly isn't like a terrible idea. This is actually pretty neat because it gives you 5% crit, and of course you can max it out 3 times, so you can get 15% critical strike chance every time you dodge for 3 seconds. It doesn't say if it stacks on top of itself, but a character who's set up for dodging could potentially take advantage of this to have a permanent 15% at the very least of critical strike chance, which isn't bad. I know a couple people. A couple aspects and things like the assimilation aspect and the crowded sage aspect, which would give you like 16% right there, and give you other really nice effects like being able to heal yourself and also building fortify. Then we got the Ravager. So Ravager is the focus ability for the Jaguar, and it's passive, minimum ferocity increased by 2. And then we have active, unleash a savage roar, causing all your attacks to trigger additional strikes. 60% damage for 6 seconds. So you get just additional strikes on top of everything. It's actually pretty powerful. I think that one's probably going to see really good use on all the characters, not just the Jaguar. Enhanced Ravager. Ravager duration is extended by 2 seconds per kill while active. This bonus is reduced by 0.25 each kill to a minimum of 0.5 seconds. Replenishing Ravager. Ravager passively stockpiles any healing you receive up to 40 stacks. While active, Ravager spends stacks to strike elite enemies up to an additional 4 times. So this is like a synergy with the Centipede side, is that you're going to stack healing effects. You could also potentially just use something like the Hectic, I would assume, which will heals you every single time you attack. There's a lot of different ways that you can potentially heal yourself. And of course, receive these stacks. And then as soon as you find an elite, you can start dishing out damage to the elite through those stacks. Measured Ravager. While Ravager is active, your core skills instantly dash to your target, and all Vigor generation is increased by 30% times. Then we have Toxic Skin. This is the focus skill for the Centipede. Passive enemies that attack you are poisoned for 45 or 30% damage over 3 seconds. Active, your toxins overflow, applying the poisoning in a trail and make you unhindered for 5 seconds. This is a kind of an interesting one. I saw someone use it, and it basically just kind of gave like a kind of reminded me of Blaze a little bit. And it also has, while active, toxic skin poisoning is increased by 100% to 60% over 3 seconds. Measured toxic skin. While toxic skin is active, your poisoning deals an additional 25% of its damage over time as critical strikes to vulnerable enemies. Replenishing Toxic Skin. Toxic Skin passively increases Thorns damage you deal to poisoned enemies by 100%. So this one's going to come in handy for the Thorns builds. As I said, there's a lot of Thorn stuff in this character. Definitely seems like they've thought out some Thorns options, and this one's definitely going to be useful for anybody who's doing the gorilla side of things. I feel like even though this is obviously the Centipede, you're going to be doing, like, for a Thorns character, you would definitely choose the gorilla as your main patron saint, basically. And this is definitely one of the skills you're going to want to get access to give yourself an additional Thorns damage. Then we get another passive, which is Apex. You deal 3% times increased vulnerable damage, double this bonus versus elite enemies. Diminishment. Vulnerable enemies deal 5% less damage to you. Endurance. Casting a defensive skill grants a 5 vigor. Fueled. Gain life, increased life on kill equal to 5% of your maximum life while you have at least 4 stacks of ferocity. So that's essentially the whole mechanic behind the Jaguar, is trying to attack as fast as possible and kill as fast as possible. So it's going to give you, a decent amount of healing if you're killing quickly enough. Although I've never been a big fan of life on kill, because I like life on hit and I like life on attack, and there's a lot of different ways that I like my life, but life on kill usually isn't as effective, so I guess we'll have to see. Perseverance. Gain 1% additional damage reduction per stack of Resolve. So this will give you, I think it's 3 bonuses, so you can get a total of 3% extra, which you can have a total of 8 stacks. So you can get, 3 times 8, which is 16 to 24. So 24% extra damage reduction on top of this. That seems like a lot. That seems like a lot. I would assume this one fluctuates, though. So the 20% damage reduction only requires that you have 1 stack. However, this one would require that you have 8 stacks to get the full bonus, which would be a total of 44% damage reduction for your Resolve stacks. That seems kind of insane. Patient Guard. Gain 10% block chance after standing still for 1 second. You gain 10% block damage reduction. Lasts for 2 seconds after your next move. So basically how block works is it's not like a full block of the damage. It only blocks a percentage of the damage. If you've seen any of the shields in Diablo 4, they block like 30% of the damage that comes in. So this one's going to give you an extra 10% damage reduction when it hits you, and then also a higher block chance as well. I'm kind of interested to try out a blocking Spiritborn. I've been hankering for a shield class. They didn't give us a shield class, but they did give us a a staff class that can block. Auspicious. After not taking damage for 5 seconds, you gain up to 10% of your maximum life as a barrier over 10 seconds. I did forget to mention that these classes can only use 2-handed weapons. There's the glaive and the staff, and that's it. They can't use any other weapons, so just 2-handed weapons. It's a strictly 2-handed weapon class, which does give them a little bit of a disadvantage in some ways. because they can't get more aspect slots like other characters. You know, like if I needed more aspect slots, I could use a one-hander and a shield or a one-hander and a focus. But they're stuck with two-handers only, which means you're going to get a big two-handed aspect, and that's it. Bastion gains 6 thorns while you have a barrier. Your thorns are increased by 30%. So this is another thorns one. Armored Hide. This one's the gorilla. Encase yourself, becoming unstoppable and gaining 100% block chance for 3 seconds. So that's going to be pretty nice for the blocking builds. And it gains 1 resolve every 5 seconds passive. So basically, you just are constantly stacking resolve. The resolve kind of works very similarly to the way that Dark Shroud does on the rogue, though. So every time you get hit, you lose a stack of resolve. So generating as many stacks of resolve as you can certainly isn't a bad thing, because as soon as your resolve stacks go down, you lose all of your damage reduction. So if you are going with like kind of this really tanky build, this one seems like it would help out a ton with that, because you're going to passively get 1 resolve every 5 seconds no matter what. And of course, it works very well as a defensive ability. Then we get activating Armored Hide grants you a maximum resolve and increases your thorns by 64 for the duration. I'm assuming that scales with level. That's probably going to be a really high amount of thorns. Adaptable Armored Hide. When you evade through enemies with Armored Hide active, you deal 100% of your thorns damage to them, and heal for 5% of your maximum life per hit. So that one's going to make evading a part of your thorns damage. So basically having your adaptable hide active, and then maybe tying that together with the centipede one with this toxic skin, and then evading through enemies, you can apply your thorns damage to them even if they don't hit you. Reinforced Armored Hide. While active, Armored Hide increases your block reduction by 5% times for every nearby enemy. And then we have Concussive Stomp. Stomp in front of you, releasing a shockwave that deals damage and knocks down enemies for 4.5 seconds. That's a pretty long time. Concussive Stomp grants a barrier equal to 10% of your maximum life per enemy hit for 3 seconds up to 100%. Adaptable Concussive Stomp. When enemies recover from Concussive Stomp, you dodge their next 3 attacks. Interesting. Counterattack. Passive. Gain 20% dodge chance and automatically retaliate against close enemies for 80% damage when you dodge all their attacks. Active. Dodge all direct attacks for 2 seconds. So it's just a 100% dodge for 2 seconds. 2 seconds doesn't sound horribly useful, but I guess it could be enough to get you out of some trouble. Counterattack's cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds per stack of ferocity you have. Adaptable counterattack. When you dodge a control impairing attack with counterattack, it will reflect that crowd control to all close enemies for 2 seconds. Interesting. Reinforced counterattack. Counterattack passively increases your critical strike damage by 10% for every close enemy. A lot of like crowded sage aspect going on here, or at least the old crowded sage used to be like how many monsters were nearby, right? So this is kind of like the new crowded sage. Scourge. We got this is the defensive centipede ability. Just realized my tip ticker wasn't on. And call forth a wave of insects that bite enemies, fearing and slowing them for 5 seconds and applying 100% poisoning damage over 6 seconds. I've seen like kind of how this one works, and it seems pretty cool. Kind of like insects come out and just kind of like bite everything. And a lot of the abilities are very much so like trying to show you the animal that's helping you in this regard. Enhanced Scourge. Each time you hit an enemy with Scourge, you gain 1% times increased damage versus crowd-controlled enemies for 6 seconds, up to 50% times. Not really a big fan of crowd control damage because it doesn't work on bosses, but I'm sure it'll be useful at least for the trash mobs. Well, you're not a pillow, sir. Get back. Get from back there, pillow boy. Adaptable Scourge. Adaptable Scourge. Lucky hitting an enemy affected by Scourge has up to a 50% chance to lifesteal 35% of the damage done. That seems pretty nice. And then Reinforced Scourge. Casting Scourge grants 100% of your maximum vigor over 6 seconds. Fluffy butt. Nourishment. This is a passive. Your healing is increased by 25%. Whenever you heal, your poisoning damage is increased by 6% times for 3 seconds, up to 30%. So as you can see here, healing is like a big part of the poisoning build. So you're going to want to like stack healing abilities. Anti-venom, you gain 15% increased poison resistance, and your maximum poison resistance is increased by 5%. Poison resistance 30% times on the next rank. So basically, we got like anti-venom abilities. Honestly, poison is one of the nastiest like things in Diablo 4, so this might actually be one that I would consider taking because it raises your maximum resistance, which is the really important thing. If it doesn't raise the maximum resistance with each rank, I might not put more than one rank into it. But in this particular case, like if it's going to bring up my poison resistance by 5%, I would totally take that. And I would see from there whether or not the maximum poison res goes up. If it does go up by 5% times each time at a 15% at a maximum, I would totally take 3 points in that because poison is one of the nastiest effects in Diablo 4, like bar none. Resilient, casting a gorilla skill grants 5% times increased maximum life for 10 seconds. Dominant, gorilla skills deal 5% times increased damage to knock down enemies and have a 5% chance to execute them if they are not a boss. Payback, smash enemies in front of you, dealing 100% damage. When attacked, you have a 35% chance to reduce Payback's active cooldown by 1 second. Speaking of which, and skill points, I believe we're getting 2 extra skill points at the expansion. I think there's more Lilith statues and stuff in the new zone because when I was looking at some of the streams, they definitely did have 2 extra skill points, by the way. So you can plan for that. Enhanced payback, each time an enemy attacks you, the damage they take from payback is increased by 5% for 60 seconds up to 75%. Okay, that seems like a Thorns option, perhaps. Poised payback. Payback passively grants you vigor when you take damage. Payback is now a core skill and consumes all available vigor to increase its damage by 0.5% for each point spent. He likes to sleep in there. This is Dusty Bones, by the way. Invasive payback, becoming control impaired while payback is on cooldown, makes it free to cast and grants you unstoppable for 3 seconds and can only occur once every 30 seconds. Brilliance, eagle skills deal 1% times increased damage for each 20% movement speed you have. So this gives you a enhancement to the damage output that you're doing just by moving fast. I think a lot of people are going to like this one, honestly, because it seems insane. Just get as much movement speed as you can and increase your damage. And a lot of people like to move fast anyway. So, you get movement speed on your boots, you get movement speed on your amulet, get any movement speed you can from other sources, stack that as high as you possibly can. Maybe get like an amulet that has a greater affix movement speed and then upgrade it. And, you get scaling damage as a result. In fact, if you choose Eagle as your patron saint, basically, this would apply to all abilities in your tree, not just the Eagle abilities, because every ability becomes an Eagle ability if you're using this effect. Acceleration, casting an Eagle skill grants 5% increased movement speed for 3 seconds. Well, there you go. That's another way you could stack movement speed to get more damage. Razor Wings. Whirl out a cluster of razor-sharp spirit feathers that rebound back, dealing 50% damage each way. This one's a potency ability, which I think would be considered like a mastery, sort of. Enhanced Razor Wings. Razor Wings makes enemies vulnerable for 5 seconds when hitting with a critical strike from behind. Invasive Razor Wings. Razor Wings consume 3 charges to send out a spiral of 3 wings at once. Poised Razor Wings. Razor Wings has a 10% chance to regain a charge when hitting an enemy a second time. Double this chance if you have an active barrier. Rushing Claw charges 4. Charge cooldown 4 per 20 seconds. Lucky hit 25%. Slash a short distance through an enemy, striking all enemies along the way twice for a total of 50% damage. Another mobility ability. Honestly, this character seems like it has a lot of mobility abilities, and it's going to be like bouncing around the battlefield like a freaking ping pong ball. Enhanced Rushing Claw. Enemies hit by Rushing Claw take 10% increased damage from Rushing Claw up to 80%. Invasive Rushing Claw. Using Rushing Claw last charge will consume instantly. Refill all charges by consuming 4 stacks of Ferocity. So you have to rebuild your Ferocity stacks. Poised Crushing Claw. When Rushing Claw hits an elite enemy, you gain 25% increased dodge chance for 3 seconds. Then we have another passive, which is potent. Hitting enemies with Jaguar skills increases the damage they take from you by 0.1% times up to 10%. So this is basically a way to stack damage from your Jaguar skills. Now keep in mind that you could potentially still use this on other classifications, like if you're a gorilla, because you can use a Jaguar skill as, like, say, your basic attack, and when you use gorilla, it's going to turn that Jaguar skill into a gorilla skill, and it's still going to maintain its Jaguar tag, which means that you could still get this 10% times by attacking with like a basic skill enough times, so it should still work. Furnace, Jaguar skills deal 2% times increased critical strike damage per stack of ferocity. And then we have Potency. This one is Touch of Death. Touch of Death is a centipede skill, and it's strike an enemy and infect them, dealing 5% damage and applying 300% poisoning damage over 9 seconds. When the infection expires or the host dies, a swarm of hatches and seeks enemies for 9 seconds, dealing 10% damage per hit. You can have up to 3 swarms active at any given time. Touch of Death's infection heals you for 2% of your maximum life per second, for a total of 18% maximum life. You heal any remaining when the swarm hatches. Invasive Touch of Death. Touch of Death swarm bursts every second, applying 30% of its base poisoning damage over 6 seconds to surrounding enemies. And then Poised Touch of Death. Touch of Death is now a core skill, which costs 70 vigor and has no cooldown. So very similar to the way that they gave Molten Boulder the treatment, where you could turn it into a core skill. Ravenous, your centipede skills deal 15% times increased damage, double this bonus versus healthy enemies. Oppressive, your centipede skills deal 30% times increased damage to crowd-controlled enemies and gain 50% increased crowd-controlled durations. The Protector, the gorilla spirit protects an area for 6 seconds, continuously smashing surrounding enemies. I've seen this, by the way. This is the ultimate. It basically is like a big circle around you, and the gorilla just keeps smashing the ground and dishing out damage to anything within the circle. And it grants you a barrier for 15% of your maximum life every 1.5 seconds. It basically is just like a really nice defensive cooldown, which also kind of like doubles as an offensive cooldown. Sort of reminds me a little bit of how a Deep Freeze works on the Sorceress, if you haven't seen that. I mean, it's completely different animation, of course, but it still seems the same. Like you're kind of just like in the center of this big circle, and the gorilla's smashing the ground. Same thing as like you're in the center of this big circle, and you're frozen, and then you're shooting out these waves of ice, which is freezing everything. It's similar, but not quite the same. Harmonious Protector. The Protector's strikes deal 300% times increased damage to non-elite enemies and reduce the damage you take from elite enemies by 30% for 6 seconds. Exalted Protector. The Protector's area persists for an additional 6 seconds. While in the area, you are unstoppable, and any enemies or small missiles inside are slowed by 80%. The Seeker, 3 charges, cooldown 30 seconds. This is a ultimate that has charges, kind of neat. The Eagle Spirit swoops down and deals 20% damage. After a short delay, it blasts off, dealing 300% damage. So basically, it comes down, and then when it comes down, it just takes off like a freaking rocket ship, and like everything that's in the area when it takes off, like it's massive amounts of damage. Harmonia Seeker. The Seeker's first hit knocks enemies down for 6 seconds, and the second hit is a guaranteed critical strike. Exalted Seeker. The Seeker constantly makes all nearby enemies vulnerable while active. Resolution. Casting an ultimate skill grants 5% times increased damage to elites for 3 seconds. Double this bonus if you are only fighting one enemy. Spiritual Attunement. Your maximum vigor is increased by 10 while you have an ultimate skill equipped. Supremacy. Any enemies you kill while ultimate skill is active grants you a stack of Supremacy, each increasing your damage by 1% times up to 10% times. When an ultimate skill ends, you gain 5 stacks of Supremacy, but you begin to lose 1 stack every second. Casting an ultimate skill makes you unstoppable for 1 second. Sustenance. Hitting enemies with ultimate skills heals you for 2% of your maximum life. Intricacy. Upon casting an ultimate skill, the last potency, defensive, or focus skill you cast prior becomes free to cast for 1 second. And then we have the Ultimate Hunter skill. Bound across the battlefield with the Jaguar Spirit, dealing 50% damage upon landing, and then rapidly slashing enemies in the area for 200% total damage over 7 strikes. Kind of sounds very similar to the monk's ability, 7-sided strike. Harmonious Hunter. The hunter overfills your ferocity by 4 stacks and causes you to deal 100% times increased damage to injure enemies for 8 seconds. So overfills your ferocity by 4 means that because it only stacks to 4, it means you would get 20% increased attack speed for 4 stacks. That means you're going to get 40% increased attack speed during the Harmonious Hunter of this ability, which is going to be pretty nice. So a nice little bump in attack speed and also a really nice little bump in damage as well. Exalted Hunter. Killing an enemy while the hunter is present has a 15% chance to instantly reset its cooldown and cause your next cast within 8 seconds to repeat its 7 strikes an additional time up to 4 times. Again, like 7-sided strikes. The Devourer, the centipede emerges, blasting enemies in a line. This one is, I literally heard one of the devs call it poison lasers. It literally looks like a poison laser. I'm not even lying. Like the big centipede actually appears, and he just literally fires his lasers, his poison laser in the direction of the target. As it emerges, we'll go to the modifiers. As it emerges, the Devourer launches 10 toxic globs that apply 105 poisoning damage over 6 seconds wherever they land. Exalted Devourer. While the Devourer is active, and if a non-boss enemy's remaining life becomes poisoned, they die instantly and unleash a pestilent swarm that deals 30% damage per hit to enemies it passes through. Noxious Resonance. Your critical strikes cause enemies to burst 100% of the total poisoning on them as poison damage to those around them. That one seems pretty nice. Prodigy's Tempo. I believe these are the ultimates I'm looking at. I totally just like phased over the fact that I was going into the ultimates. Yes, this is one of the ultimates. It's called Noxious Resonance. So this is the one that is your critical strikes cause enemies to burst 100% of their total poison damage on them as poison damage to those around them. So it basically turns like your poison damage into an AoE poison damage, which is kind of neat. And then we have Prodigy's Tempo. Every third consecutive cast of the same basic skill increases all skill ranks by 2 for 5 seconds. Every third consecutive cast of the same core or potency skill reduces all skills' active cooldowns by 10% and increased by 2% for each of their skill ranks. So this is basically a way that you can get more abilities off, obviously. Getting higher damage for attacking faster. Tempo obviously refers to, musical, the tempo of, like of a song, is that basically they're kind of saying that like this is going to help you attack faster. It's going to help you use your cooldowns more often. And in general, just going to like pick up the pace, pick up the tempo of the fight. Then we have Adaptive Stances. The base spirit of a skill grants Eagle 30% movement speed, Gorilla 30% damage reduction, Jaguar 30% attack speed increase, and Centipede 30% lifesteal. Casting a skill of a different base spirit swaps to the new bonus, increases all damage by 30% times for 5 seconds. Seems kind of nice. I mean, you can basically rotate between them, or you could potentially just use only that one. I mean, 30% damage reduction from the gorilla seems massive. 30% movement speed equals increased damage, as we learned from the multiplier for movement speed. So that's just a straight movement speed increase for the damage increase for the eagle. Attack speed, of course, is damage increase as well, and centipede lifesteal is kind of neat as well. I mean, 30% lifesteal is a lot of lifesteal. Now, there are other ways you can get increased lifesteal, though. Increases all damage by 30% times, though, for 5 seconds, which is nice. So casting a skill of a different base swaps to the new bonus and increases all damage by 30%. So it sounds like to me, with this, you would just be cycling through them, or, like going back and forth between 2 of them. And what this would do is it would get you that damage bonus that would stay active pretty much all the time. So if you were like, say, a Jaguar, and you also happen to have like the eagle or the centipede, you would be swapping back and forth between 30% attack speed and 30% lifesteal. Now, while some of these bonuses are like okay, I don't really particularly like the 30% damage reduction being like inactive at times, and I don't really like the 30% attack speed being inactive at times. For those of you who are well aware, when you have attack speed that is like constantly activating and deactivating, it makes for a very poor experience because your character's, 1 second he's like, and then the next second he's like, shing, 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 and then the next second he's back to shing, 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 and it makes for a very jarring experience to have the attack speed like come and go essentially. And the damage reduction also, it's not going to be very useful if it's constantly waning. I mean, 30% damage reduction is a lot, don't get me wrong. And when it's active, you're going to feel like a god. But then when it is inactive, you're going to feel very weak, especially if you're relying on it. Vital Strikes. You deal 100% times increased damage to vulnerable enemies. After making an enemy vulnerable, your next direct damage dealt to them heals you for 2% of your maximum life, generates 5 vigor, and removes the vulnerable effect. Interesting. So you're going to have to reapply it. Basically, like the whole eagle tree is dedicated to making enemies vulnerable, though. So I'm assuming that this is specifically for the eagle anyway, because removing the vulnerable ability and then immediately reapplying it basically is kind of like how the whole eagle works. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can apply vulnerable to monsters these days, and honestly, the seems like the eagle has about 1,000 ways to apply vulnerable. So this certainly wouldn't be an issue for any of the eagle mains. It might be a little bit more of an issue for someone who's not an eagle main, though. I also found some of the augments. I kind of got some screenshots of those. So this one is affixes that can be applied to weapons. Thunder Spike damage, 140%, 30% chance for Quill volley projectiles to cast twice, 185% the Seeker damage, and 35% primary Eagle Spirit Hall potency. So we do have one of the doubles there. Aspect of the Sky Power, this one is a lucky hit up to a 25% chance to create Mystic Circles for 10 seconds. Casting an Eagle skill in Mystic Circles empowers them to move with you and explode for lightning damage when you evade. And Aspect of Fleet Wings, Razor Wings is now also an Incarnate skill. With passive, you are unhindered. Active, you gain 15% or up to 30% increased movement speed per active Razor Wing. So another way that you can increase your damage, obviously, since your damage is based on your movement speed. I have a feeling that the Eagle is going to be really popular because of the fact that it's a movement speed / damage ability. A lot of people really tend to like and go for characters that can move fast and dish out damage at the same time. Like, for instance, one of the reasons Whirlwind was really popular back in Diablo 3 because you could move and attack at the same time and then get massive amounts of attack speed, and then you were just whirlwinding through the entire level. I would imagine that being able to stack up as much movement speed as you can as damage is going to be a really popular effect here. Aspect of Redirected Force, gain increased critical strike damage equal to 190% of your block chance. Blocking doubles this bonus for 10 seconds. So this is one specifically for the blocking characters. So this is going to get you a huge damage bonus when you block of basically critical strike damage bonus of 190%. And then it doubles this bonus for 10 seconds when you actually block. So you get, what is that, 400 or 380% increased critical strike damage for that duration. That's actually pretty dang nice. Ruthless Aspect, your critical strike chance with Jaguar skills is increased against enemies by 1%, 1 to 8.5% for each 10% of their missing life. So this the Jaguar seems to be focused around trying to like get those monsters down to low HP, and the lower HP they have, the more ferocious you're getting because you're smelling the blood in the air that they're close to death, and so you're getting more ferocious as you feel their end coming. And here's a map that we managed to find. This was thanks to Wudijo. So he took a screenshot of the map. This is the new area Nahatu. There is some areas that are blocked off here. As you can see, there's an obvious circle right here, which seems to be like a world boss area. This area over here was a very interesting area that was like shrouded in darkness, and you had to like carry around lanterns and stuff, which I could pull up on stream here. There was a special boss there, which was pretty neat. And I mean, so far the area has been pretty cool. Let's go ahead and pull back up the footage real quick, and I'm going to see if I can find that lantern area to show you guys. This is the lantern area. And it's actually pretty cool carrying around the lantern. When you attack, you actually drop the lantern. There was actually a special boss at the end of this as well, specific to the area. Wudijo actually died. I kind of laughed. I chuckled a little bit. He's a hardcore character. He's not supposed to die. That would have been the end. The end. I can fast forward a little bit and find the boss. Where is he? Fights the boss and he kind of gets his booty cheeks clapped. I think this is the boss right here. So this is one of the new. This isn't really a boss. This is like a stronghold boss, basically. So and he's in World Tier 2 right now, so it's not exactly the most difficult area in the world. Although his character wasn't really like fully decked out or anything. He was level 30, from what I understand. I kind of like locked at level 30, and equipment also wasn't the greatest on the characters. Definitely could have been a little bit better. It had an interesting mechanic of dealing with the lanterns, so you have to actually like do mechanics to kill the boss. He won't take any damage unless you do the mechanics. He also has this big old honking shield, and I noticed that he doesn't take any damage until the shield is broken. And you notice he has this big giant barrier at the top. The barrier basically is his shield. So once you break the shield, then he drops the shield physically, and then you can start actually attacking him directly and dishing out damage. But for the time being, while he has the shield active, you basically just can't do any damage to him. Seems to be a new mechanic that they have in the new world of the expansion. Of course, this stuff is all coming much later. We're not going to get this in season 5. We're going to get this stuff in season 6, so it's still up and coming. And of course, all these skills that I showed you and read off to you could change, from this point. But I figure it's pretty cool to get this stuff out in the open so people can start maybe theory crafting some builds, coming up with some fun stuff. Especially the eagle. I figure like there's a lot of movement speed you can get with the eagle, so we're gonna see. There's also a lot of changes to the unique items coming in season 5. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to definitely get changed between now and then. I would expect season 5 to be a bridge between season 6, so it's probably going to help us get ready for season 6. It might not be the best season because they got to do a lot of balancing during season 5, especially to get things ready for the expansion. And understandably so. I mean, that's why they got season 5 in the first place, so they can do all the testing and make sure everything's working right before we get into the big boy season 6 and we get the new areas and the new bosses and all the new stuff that they got added in. So far, the new class does seem really neat. If I had to say that it seems like anything specific, it really seems more like a monk than anything else from Diablo 3. And out of all the classes in Diablo 3, I think monk was literally my favorite. I'm not a big fan of Diablo 3, as I've been very vocal in the past. I don't really like Diablo 3 at all. I think let's go back and see that death one more time. Um, I'm not really a big fan of Diablo 3, but I did enjoy the monk. I thought the monk was a very fun class, and it does seem like this character is a lot more like the monk than other classes. It does have a lot of mobility, so you could draw some parallels to the rogue as well. But it definitely seems to be almost like a monk type class. My first reaction actually, my honest first reaction, Power Ranger. That's what I thought in my head. I was like, is this a freaking Power Ranger? Is this Tommy the Green Ranger or freaking like because there was like a whole Power Ranger series where they had like animal powers and there was like a gorilla and they had like they had like the bird and whatnot and there was a bunch of stuff and it just like every time they would do their attacks on the Power Ranger show like the gorilla would be like behind the guy doing the gorilla attacks and it would look like the gorilla was helping him to like do the smashes and stuff and I couldn't help but think like freaking animal Power Rangers, go Power Rangers. But no, it really does seem like a fun class. I'm actually excited to get into this class and start doing some theory crafts with it. It could be fun to play around with the ideas, like trying to max out as much movement speed as possible. Playing around with the healing of the centipede. I feel like there's a lot of interesting combinations, especially with the existing aspects. And of course, we don't even know all the aspects that are for the Spiritborn itself. So that's a whole other thing. Um, all in all, though, just it's I know it's not the Paladin. Like, I mean, let me just say that. I know it's not the Paladin. I know that it's not the class that you wanted. You wanted the Paladin. I know that's not what it is. But, I mean, Probably one of the best classes from Diablo 3, in my opinion, which is the monk, and with a lot of upgrades and some very interesting powers. I mean, there's definitely a lot of parallels going on to like the abilities on the monk, and also the weapons like the glaives and the dye bows, all the or the staves, and also the fact that you can block with the staff, which was also a thing. The only thing that worries me about the class is the abilities have all different elements types. So the jaguar is fire, the bird is lightning, the gorilla is physical damage, and the centipede is poison. And when it comes to scaling, like if you're trying to scale poison damage, or you're trying to scale lightning, or you're trying to scale fire, or you're trying to scale physical, or whatever it may be that you're trying to scale, if you're using one of the other abilities, which is obviously not the element that you're scaling, things could get a little wonky. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out. It really depends on how the scaling works on the character. We haven't gotten to look at the Paragon board, so before you ask, there was these characters were only level 30, so there was no Paragon boards available for these characters. So these were characters were pre-Paragon board, and obviously didn't have all their skill points either, so you couldn't get access to their full power level. The backstory behind the class is basically that Akarat traveled back to Nahatu, where his mother was born, and this was where he found the spirit realm, and he started to experiment with the ability to get into the spirit realm, and he eventually did leave, leaving behind disciples that knew his techniques and started to like work toward the Spiritborn character class, so to speak. And it basically from what the story is trying to say is that like there were places like this all across the sanctuary when Lilith and Anarius made Sanctuary. There were tons of these all over the place, but basically all of them, if not basically the majority of them, have been corrupted by the angels or the demons at some point. And this is one of the very few that hasn't been corrupted by angels or demons and is still being protected by the humans, which essentially keep it from being corrupted. So we're in one of the few spirit lands that actually, like has a uncorrupted spirit sort of area, and that's where the spirit guardians come from. That's where the gorilla comes from, and the jaguar and the centipede and the bird. I think that pretty much covers everything. I've already been going for like an hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about the new Spiritborn class. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer, whatever I can. As always, if you enjoy my videos, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to check out my shop. I got lots of cool rune patches on there. Anything to support the channel and keep me going. And as always, keep watching.